What if I told you the Pentagon's biggest nightmare isn't a Chinese stealth fighter or a Russian hypersonic missile, but a small, affordable jet from Sweden that costs less than a single F-35 engine? Welcome back to Defense Upcast. Today we're exposing why America's defense establishment quietly panics every time Sweden's Saab Gripen lands another export deal. This isn't about dogfights or stealth technology. This is about something far more dangerous to US dominance, a better idea. Let's dive in. To understand why Gripen terrifies Pentagon planners, we need to rewind to Cold War Sweden. Picture this, a neutral country surrounded by NATO on one side and the Soviet Union on the other. Sweden couldn't rely on anyone for help. So they asked themselves a brutal question: how do we survive when the enemy has more planes, more missiles, and will target our air bases first? The answer wasn't to build a bigger, more expensive fighter. It was to build a completely different kind of air force. Saab designed the Gripen to operate from highways, not pristine runways, to be serviced by conscripts with minimal training, not teams of specialized technicians, to turn around in under 10 minutes, not hours, to fight a war where every major airbase has been destroyed in the first hour. This is distributed warfare, and it works. A Gripen can land on a 2-lane forest road, be refueled and rearmed by 6 people, including 1 highly trained technician and 5 conscripts, and be back in the air before American fighters have finished their pre-flight checks. This isn't theoretical. Sweden practices this regularly. Now here's where it gets interesting for the Pentagon. The US model of air power is the exact opposite. Large air bases, massive logistics chains, hundreds of support personnel per aircraft, complex maintenance requiring specific hangars with climate control for its stealth coating. It requires proprietary diagnostic systems. Each jet demands over 40 maintenance hours per flight hour. Gripen, 8 maintenance hours per flight hour. See the problem? America built an air force designed to dominate from untouchable bases. Sweden built an air force designed to survive when those bases don't exist anymore. Now let's talk about what really keeps Pentagon analysts up at night. It's not performance specs, it's economics and influence. A new Gripen E costs approximately $85 million, an F-35A, $110 to $135 million, depending on the contract. But that's just the sticker price. The real damage comes from operational costs. The F-35 costs around $36,000 per flight hour. The Gripen, roughly $4,500. Let that sink in. You can fly a Gripen 8 times for the cost of 1 F-35 sortie. For smaller NATO countries, this is revolutionary. Suddenly you can afford to actually fly your air force, train your pilots properly, maintain high readiness, build a force that's sustainable during peacetime and available during war. This creates a narrative problem for American defense contractors. When Poland or Romania or Colombia looks at their budget and realizes they can have a larger, more active air force with Gripen than with American jets, questions start getting asked in Washington. But the Pentagon's concern goes deeper than lost sales. It's about control. When a country buys F-35s, they're not just buying aircraft, they're buying into the American command ecosystem. The F-35's mission data files, those are loaded by Lockheed. Want to integrate a weapon the US doesn't approve? Good luck. Software updates controlled by the Pentagon. You don't own your aircraft, you lease access to American air power. Gripen offers something fundamentally different: actual sovereignty. Sweden actively helps buyers develop their own aerospace industries. Technology transfer is part of the deal. Brazil isn't just buying Gripens, they're building them. They're developing weapons for them. They're creating jobs and industrial capacity that will last decades. This is the real threat. Every Gripen sale represents not just 1 less F-35 sold, but 1 less country fully dependent on American logistics, American spare parts, American approval for every mission. The Pentagon calls this interoperability. Sweden calls it independence. And there's another uncomfortable truth the Pentagon has to swallow. The Gripen proves you don't need a 5th-generation stealth fighter to be effective in modern warfare. How? Through sensor fusion, electronic warfare, and network-centric operations. The Gripen may not be invisible to radar, but its electronic warfare suite is exceptional. Its data link lets it see through other aircraft's sensors. It can fire missiles based on targeting data from an AWACS or ground radar while remaining completely silent. In exercises against F-35s, Gripens have scored kills, not because they're better aircraft, but because the pilots fly them more. When you can afford 8 times the training hours, pilot skill becomes the deciding factor. Sweden demonstrated this in red flag exercises, where their pilots, despite flying an older generation aircraft, performed remarkably well against American 4th and 5th generation fighters. The Pentagon knows something the public doesn't. In a real conflict, availability beats capability. A hangar full of F-35s waiting for spare parts loses to a highway full of Gripens that never stop flying. So what does this mean for the future of air power? We're watching a quiet revolution unfold. Countries are starting to ask harder questions. Does defending our airspace really require a $100 million jet? Do we need stealth when our doctrine is defensive? Can we afford an air force that's too expensive to actually fly? The answers are reshaping NATO. Brazil chose Gripen. Thailand chose Gripen. The Czech Republic is seriously considering Gripen. These aren't poor countries making budget choices. These are smart countries making strategic choices. They're choosing sustainability over prestige. And here's what makes this truly significant. In a conflict with China or Russia, those massive American air bases in the Pacific and Europe, they're not sanctuaries anymore. China has invested heavily in precision missiles specifically designed to crater runways and destroy parked aircraft. Russia demonstrated in Ukraine that fixed infrastructure dies first. The era of untouchable air bases is over. Suddenly, Sweden's highway landing, quickly dispersed fighter doctrine doesn't look like a quirky Cold War relic. It looks like the future. The US is now spending billions developing agile combat employment, the ability to operate from dispersed, austere locations. They're literally trying to retrofit American air power to operate more like Gripen was designed to from the beginning. This is the strategic checkmate Sweden created. They didn't outbuild America, they outthought America. While the US was perfecting centralized air dominance, Sweden was perfecting distributed air survival. And in modern warfare, survival matters more than dominance. The Pentagon isn't worried Gripen will shoot down F-35s. They're worried Gripen proves you don't need F-35s at all. That's infinitely more dangerous to American defense strategy. So here's the bottom line. The Gripen isn't the best fighter jet in the world. It's not trying to be. It's trying to be good enough, affordable enough, and sustainable enough to actually defend a country for decades, and it succeeds spectacularly. The real question isn't whether Gripen can beat an F-35 in a dogfight. The real question is, in 2025, with precision missiles threatening every fixed base, with defense budgets under pressure, with pilot training hours declining across NATO, which philosophy wins? The $100 million jet that's too valuable to risk and too expensive to fly? Or the $30 million jet you can actually afford to put in the air? Sweden isn't challenging American military power, they're challenging American military thinking. And sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a missile or a stealth coating, it's a better idea. That's why the Pentagon watches Gripen so carefully, not because it's unstoppable, but because it's sustainable. Not because it's revolutionary, but because it's right-sized. Not because it threatens American jets, but because it threatens American influence. If you found this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button. We're Defense Upcast, where we go beyond the headlines to understand what really shapes modern warfare. Drop a comment. Do you think distributed air power is the future, or is centralized dominance still king? I'll see you in the next one. Stay informed, stay sharp.